Okay, so welcome back. In this video we're going to start working with a Mongo database. So first of all we need to install it, then I'll suggest one piece of software that really helps me out called Robomongo, which you should also install if you would like to have like a nice interface to be able to like at quick glance see like what your database contains without using the terminal or something like that. So let's get started. First of all, you'll need the Mongo database itself, and as you can see, this is the site for the Mongo database. And now you can come here and go download, and then you can simply choose your operating system, and then you should be good to go. If you have any troubles with this, write down in the comments, and me or someone else could help you that way. Once you have this installed, I highly suggest downloading this piece of software, formerly called Robomongo, and now this is its new name, so you can download it over here and install it. And after you've done those two things, join me back. So now let's say that you have installed them. What we need to do is also install the Mongoose. So why we're using the Mongoose is we don't really want to be using the Mongo database like directly. So to say, we want to use this Mongoose interface that the Mongoose package provides for us, which is a bit nicer way to work with Mongo database in my opinion. So we'll need to go to our commander, and I'll need to quit this server. And now I'll go yarn add Mongoose. Okay, and that should be good to go. So now we actually need to get a handle on it inside of our entry file. So I'll simply type const mongoose equals require, and then mongoose again. And now we actually need to make a connection. If you were using some other database, there is a good chance that you actually would need to go on and first of all create a new database for the project that you're working in. But when using the Mongo database with the Mongoose, you don't actually need to do that. Mongoose will do that automatically for you in case that database isn't existing at the moment. So now we need to connect to our database, but pretending that we already have it pretty much running. So what we need to do is call Mongoose, and then there is a function called connect, and inside of this function you need to pretty much like write the URI for your database. So you start off by specifying the protocol, which is a Mongo database in this example. And then since we're working on our local machine, we will type localhost, and then we're going to type the name of our database. Now I'll simply call it API Authentication, but feel free to call it whatever you want. And now that we have this done, what we need to do is start working on our models for this project. So we are only going to have one model that is going to be called user. So let's actually create a new folder inside of here, and let's call that folder models. And we want that folder to be on the top level. And then this folder models will contain one file called user.js, like this. Now inside of this file, we first of all need to get a handle again on the Mongoose. And once we have that, we also need to create a shortcut for the schema. And what we can do is we can type const schema equals mongoose.schema. Now this really isn't necessary. This is just a common practice from what I've been able to see. Like on the next line we'll pretty much use this schema, but we could also have used it like this. So I just got into habit of doing that, but this is by no means necessary to do. So here we need to create a schema, and here we need to create a model, and then we need to export the model, pretty much like this. Now when it comes to creating schema, we want to describe this user, like how will it look inside of our database. Like there will be like collection called users, and that collection will contain multiple documents of many different users. And in this schema, we just want to describe like what each user should look like. And what I mean by saying should look like, I pretty much mean like describing all the fields that the document should contain. So let's get started by simply creating a new variable that will hold all of that schema, and we can call it user schema like this. And then we need to create a new schema, so new instance of this schema, and we need to pass in here the object. So what I was saying earlier, you could pretty much copy this and do it like this, and it will be the same. And now here we need to specify all the fields that our user should have. Now in this project, we'll only have really email and password, but what you could also have is maybe like age, or like nickname, or like first name, last name, username, anything of that nature. So I'm going to simply specify email, which is going to be of a type string, and password, which is also going to be of a type string for now. Later on we'll come back and actually add much more details to these two fields, for example to check for the uniqueness and to check whether they're required and so on. But now let's say that we're done with this, and then what we need to do is we need to actually create a model. So to do that, we have this function called mongoose.model that takes two arguments. The first argument is pretty much the name of our model, so we're going to say user, and you want to put a singular name inside of here, because what the Mongoose will actually do is it will take this name and make it like in the plural form, and then you'll see the collection called like plural of this name over here, and you'll see that in a second. And then we need to provide pretty much a schema that we just made, so I'm going to type user schema. Okay, and now this whole thing over here will actually return back to us a model. So we need to store it somewhere, so we can say const uppercase user and simply make that equal to this. And next we need to simply module.export the user itself, like this, so that we will have access to it later on. Now with this done over here, we can actually go inside of our controllers and pretty much like play with this and see it working. So what we can do is we can remove this and actually this, and let's simply write something. So for example, let's actually create a new user with the email and the password that gets sent to us via the client, or in our case via the postman. So first of all, let's get a handle on our email and password. So we're going to say const email equals request.value. Remember .value, not .body, because we're using that joy validation. So request.value.body, and then we have a property called email, and then we can also do the same for password, like this. But what I like to do here is use ESX, so I'm going to type const and then pretty much destruct those two values of the request.value.body. So both like this and this over here are like equivalent, and feel free to use whichever you want. This just feels like nicer way to do it for me. So now that we have our email and password, we can actually create a new user. So let's say const new user equals new, and then we need to get access to that model that we just wrote. So before I move any further, let us actually import that model file. So I'm going to say const user equals require, and then we need to navigate to its path. So I need to go up one directory, models, and then user file like this. So now I can type new user, and inside of this function I need to specify the object that will contain all the fields that this user should have. So I'm going to make it like this, and I'm going to say email is going to be equal this email over here, and then the password is going to be equal to this password over here. So pretty much we are referring back to this user model that we made. So like this, but now like of course I want to use the ES6 badly. So in the ES6 what happens is when you have these type of objects where the key name and the value is stored in the variable that is the same name as the key name over here, what you can do is actually get rid of typing it twice and just make it like this, and it will be the same. So I'm going to make it like this, and then I can bring it all up on this line and maybe make it more like shorter to write, and this is just like a personal preference, you can follow it and you of course don't have to. So now inside of this new user variable we'll have this new user created for us, but the thing is it won't get yet stored to the database. We need to explicitly save it to our database. So what we need to do next is simply call new user.save like this. But of course this function is dealing with our database and it is not going to be like instantaneously done, so it might take a couple of milliseconds or nanoseconds or how many long seconds. The thing is it's not going to happen instantly, so we need to using this async await to actually await for that to be finished before moving on. And over here we should actually now have this user stored. So what we can do is we can simply respond back yes with a JSON, and we can say something like user created, something like this. And now we can actually test this. So we can open our Robomongo, and in case it is the first time you are starting the Robomongo, you wouldn't see this screen, you would actually see something like this. And in case you don't have any connections over here, you would simply go create, and then you can pretty much leave everything as is. You just need to maybe change the name if you want and click save, and then you would end up with something similar, and then you just click connect. And in case you tried that and it said some sort of error that it couldn't connect to the database, what could also happen is that you maybe didn't start the Mongo database actually. So what you need to do is, if you're on the Windows like I am currently, you need to go to this directory. So inside of your program files you have Mongo database, you have a server folder, then you have a version of the Mongo database folder, and inside of that folder you have a folder called bin that contains the MongoDB executable file, and you just need to execute it, and then you'll see like a bunch of text like this, and then you'll be able to like connect to it. So now I can connect. I still don't see our database over here because we still didn't make any change to it, but as soon as we actually create our first user, it will pop up over here and we'll be able to see it. So without any further ado, let's actually do that. So using the Postman, let's create a post request to this URL over here, and let's simply have some email and password over here, and I'm going to click send, and let's see what happens. Okay, that didn't work because my server wasn't running, so I'm going to go yarn start dev, and let me do that again. Okay, now you see user created. Okay, we see some deprecation warning that we'll address in a second, but more importantly, if we come here and we actually refresh this, we'll see the API Authentication database. And if you navigate to its collections, you'll see the users collection, and users is actually pluralized. That's because of this. Like I told you, like it used this form and then pluralized it for the collection name. And now if you go inside of that, you'll see all of the documents, and we have this one document over here that is our user right now. So we see the email and we see the password over here. So that's great for now, and that's certainly a step in right direction. So now what we can do is we can do some more details about all of this. So let's go back to our controllers file and take a look like what needs to happen in this sign up. So first of all, I'll get rid of this. We don't need it anymore, and I'll also get rid of them over here. So first of all, we need to get access to email and password, and we have that here, so that's great. Next, we need to check whether the user containing that email already exists. So we don't want to allow someone to create two accounts using the same email address, so we need to check if there is a user with the same email. Okay, then if that fails, meaning that there are no users with that email, then we want to proceed and we want to actually create a new user like this. And at the end, we want to actually not respond with JSON saying that user was created, but respond with token. Okay, so this is what this function should do in the end. So let us tackle this task over here, checking if the user with the same email already exists. So it will be really easy and similar to what we've done here already with a slight change. So we're going to create a new variable called foundUser, and we'll actually call this user model over here, like user. And then there is a function called find1. Now you can find a specific user either by ID in case you have it, or you can find it by some of its properties. So you can find a specific user either by their email or their password. In this example, we're going to use the email. So we're going to say find1, and then we need to again specify an object. So we're looking by the email, and the email that we're interested in checking is this email over here. And that should be good, but of course, like, this function over here is similar to this function over here in terms that it is not done instantaneously. It takes a couple of milliseconds, or how many long, so we need to await it first. And you might have spotted this same pattern that we had over here, and of course, using the ES6 we can simply get rid of this part over here, which makes for nicer code. Okay, so now what will happen is, if there is a user containing this email, it will get stored in this variable. So we pretty much need to check if the user was found, or in other words, if this variable isn't empty, so to speak. And now we can respond back to the client, let's say with a status of, let's say 403, meaning like forbidden, like you're forbidden to create this user because it already exists. And then what we also want to do is pretty much send some sort of a message. So we can send something like error, and then we can say email is already in use or something similar. But we can also send it via JSON. For example, if the client was using, say, React or something like that. And of course, we can bring this to the new line. One slight adjustment that we need to make is we actually need to return this, not just call it like this, because if we call it like this, it will try to execute the following code, and then the Express will complain to us that the headers were already sent. And so what we need to do is simply make it return, so it actually exits with this line of code over here. So now that should be good. And if that isn't the case, we actually create a new user, and then for now we are responding back with a user created, but we'll change this in the next videos where we introduce the actual tokens. So now I'll save this. Thanks to our NodeMoon, it actually already got restarted, and now let me actually try to create the same user once again. So the same email and the same password. So we get that error, that email is already in use, and great. So yeah, that is working. Now you see here two deprecation warnings. One is that the open function is deprecated in Mongoose, like the newest Mongoose, and the other deprecation warning is that mpromise, like Mongoose default promise library, is deprecated and we need to plug in our own. So this first one, this just so happens in like the latest versions of Mongoose, and from what I've been able to read on the GitHub, this is some sort of a bug, because what it suggests over here to use the use Mongo client, if you do this, then they actually doesn't work as it should be. So for now, I would say like just ignore this. There is a good chance if you're watching this in like the future that you'll do like everything that I did here and you simply won't see this message. But if you really want this to go away, then what you could do is simply like remove the Mongoose dependency and like install some of the earlier versions, and then you just won't see this deprecation warning over here. And when it comes to this second deprecation warning, we can actually do it. That's not like any bug. We just need to like specify by ourselves like what promise library Mongoose should use. So for that, you need to come to this entry file app.js, and before we actually do this connection over here, we need to actually specify that promise library. So we're going to say mongoose.promise with an uppercase promise equals, and then you need to specify the promise library over here. Now you could use something like Bluebird or some other third-party promise libraries. I'm going to be using the ES6 native promise library, so I'm just going to reference the global object and then call the promise over here. So now if I save this and this gets restarted, you see we just have that first deprecation warning and this is gone away. So for now, this looks good. Like we really can't do this yet because we aren't dealing with tokens right now. This sign in is also going to generate token, but again we can't do it right now because we're not talking about them in this video. But what we can do before we finish this video is we can navigate back to this user model and like make some adjustments to these two properties. So first adjustment that we can do is say that the password is required. So when you simply want to specify if the property is a string or a number or something like that, you can do it like this on one line. But as soon as you want to actually tell to Mongoose like more details about a particular property, then you need to actually make that property to be object that will contain like all of that specifications. So what we want to type is that the type is actual string, and maybe we want to say that required is actually true, so it is required. Okay, but now you could argue that we're already doing the server-side validation with that Joy package, so we don't really need to do validation using the Mongoose, which you would be absolutely correct. But the reason why I like to do it both is because like if we later on switch from Mongo database to say something like Postgres, SQL or similar, they may or may not have the validations built in, and then the server-side validation that we did manually will really save us in that regard. But now I really don't want to just not use this, because this is a perfect opportunity for me to tell you like more about Mongoose, so that is like the only reason I'm doing it over here. So with this we're making it so that the password is required, and we'll do something similar with the email. So with the email we want to specify that the type is string, and we want to say that it is also required, and we also want to say that it should be unique. And in order for two emails to be unique, we need to actually make them to be both of them like lowercase, because in Mongoose's eyes, code worker like this and code worker like this are sadly two different emails. So that's the reason for this. But of course, like even this right now, we don't really need it because we're handling it over here. So I'm just saying you like some additional details, but this really isn't required because in the way we actually structured all of it, we're only going to actually talk with database in case all of those were correct in the first place. But anyway, you know now how to do it. So I think this will be it for this video. It is getting really long. I just want to say that this user file isn't complete just yet. We'll need to come back to this file later on and actually create some sort of like methods and functions that will do the password validation and like password hashing and sorting. Like right now, if you take a look here, you see that we are storing this password as a plain text, which is a big no-no when it comes to building a servers. So we'll need to do that, but that is tightly coupled with passport, so I'll try to do both of that in a single video. And yeah, so that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed this one. I hope it wasn't too long and that you learned something. And thanks for watching. I'll see you in some of my next videos.